Hello, I'm Lodging Editor Kate Hughes. Thank you for listening to Lodging on Demand. For this episode, Adria Levtchenko, CEO of PurpleCloud Technologies, Tim Heim, Area GM of Focus Hospitality, and Phil Cordell, SVP and Global Head of Brand Development for Hilton, join me to discuss how the hotel industry's approach to cleanliness will change as a result of COVID-19. So what I want to start with is how everyone thinks cleaning protocols are going to change in a post-COVID-19 hotel industry, especially because the industry already has a reputation for being pretty clean. So it's really going to have to step things up a notch. So Phil, let's start with you. What do you think is going to change once this starts to pass?
I think cleanliness has always, to your point, been an expectations. I think a couple things. One, visibility and transparency to guests as to what's happening. Many times in the past, it happened late at night or behind the scenes, and there was kind of an implied understanding that it was there. So helping guests kind of understand and see what's there. With I think some expectation of are you focusing on the things that are important to me, and do I get a role in kind of helping ensure it happens? So I think as each hotel kind of steps up their game and kind of focusing on the things that matter most, engaging the guests to kind of participate in that through the use of sandy wipes and stuff, so that they have some added sense of comfort that things are disinfected properly.
And Tim, what about from your perspective? What do you see changing?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think from the property level and from the hotel standpoint, I think we're going to see more of stricter protocols with deep cleaning, with how we're looking at disinfecting items. We're already seeing changes right now with things happening with amenity changes and various things like that in the guest rooms. So it's going to be not only that we're being transparent and we're showing everything that we're doing, but it's going to be very imperative that we're actually hitting all of those target points too as well, and making sure that we're providing a comfortable stay and atmosphere for our guests to make sure that they know that they're staying in a safe, clean place during all of this.
And Adria, you have kind of a different perspective because of what PurpleCloud does. So what do you see changing from your point of view?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think the big important thing is employee safety. So I think that, as long as people are really well trained, know how to use all the new equipment, I think all of that's going to be really critical moving forward as well. Making sure that, they know how to put on their PPE if they're wearing PPE. They know how to, constantly be disinfecting carts and things that they're sharing. I think that is going to definitely continue, because it's going to be very important for them to make sure that they're safe as well, because, making sure that guests are safe, always starts with making sure that the employees are safe and are, trusting to be there.
What do you think hotels are already doing really well, and what do you think they're going to need to focus on in the future? And I'm going to stick with you, Adria, because you really are keeping track of what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think people have always been really good at, like you mentioned in the beginning, they've always been focusing on cleaning. So there's already a lot of standards in place for, public area checklists and, making sure that things are getting done very regularly, as well as using proper chemicals. That's always been, Ecolab standards and things like that. But I think something that's going to really need to change is focusing on auditing. So, something that a lot of managers have always struggled with is having enough time to do enough inspections for cleanliness and quality assurance. I think now more than ever, it's going to be really critical for them to, know that something might have not been cleaned properly. So I think, specifically in a lobby, if you see somebody doing a quick swipe of a Lysol wipe over a handrail rather than a thorough, up and back, making sure they got the whole thing, I think that's really going to be the big driver for guest trust and obviously safety as well. So I think as long as they, focus on auditing, which, not to do a self-plug, but we do, time checklists. So we're able to kind of flag, okay, this was done way too quickly. There's most likely a critical concern here. So I think that that's going to be a really big piece that they need to work on. We're actually also donating a free version of PurpleCloud, which we're calling PurpleCloud CR for COVID response, that is actually doing these targeted checklists, which are timed so that we can do thorough analysis on whether or not anything was skipped or not properly cleaned. Besides that, there's also training materials, people send messages so that you can socially distance through your teams. You can go on break in very spread out manners. You can export checklists. So if you want to provide that transparency, extra transparency to your guests, all of that's in here. And we're just trying to help as many hotels as possible. So it is free for any hotel to use this software.
Right. And Phil, what are you thinking that hotels are already doing well, and what needs to happen in areas where they need to up their game?
Yeah, I think it's on focusing on what matters the most, right? There's certain high contact points that have always been part of the cleaning protocol. But if we think about the things that because of guest environment or guest kind of usage or touch points of those items, kind of stepping up the game to make sure those areas kind of are revisited. And I think also just kind of helping your team members understand, their scope of work is going to change a little bit. There's going to be everything from adjustments to cleaning protocol to a mindset shift about how we think about kind of signaling hospitality to our guests, right? You can't maybe see a guest through their mask and smile. You can't grab a hand. So, not only are there tactical things that we're going to have to kind of work with their team members on, but in some ways, I think we're going to have to kind of up our game and try to communicate what hospitality really is and how to interact with guests kind of in this new environment.
And Tim, what about you? You once again are at a different level than the other people. So what are you seeing in the properties? What's going well? What isn't going well? What could improve?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is we've seen all the properties adapt to the current environment. And a lot of that has been, also with a lot of the information that they received from the brands, a lot of the information that we've also received with the protocols from the CDC. The response to that was done quickly. I think companies too, when this first happened, we were dealing with lower occupancies. We were having to deal with other things with staffing and other financial things. But with that, it was also just making sure that we were reacting and making sure that our associates were taken care of and making sure that they were getting all the appropriate needs that they needed to make sure that the guests were safe and the guests feel comfortable. So I think we saw everybody come together. As far as some opportunities, this is going to be an ever-evolving process. So I think it's just important that we stay on top of standards. We follow all guidelines. We work with our brands. We listen to our brands. I think it's also going to be keeping our associates engaged. The more that we can keep them engaged, be transparent, speak to them, support them, I think that's definitely going to help us from a hotel level. And I think the third thing is going to be listening to our guests. I think it's going to be really important that we're engaging with them. We're asking them questions. What are we doing well? What could we do better? I think if we're doing all of those components, it's really going to help us knock it out of the park at the end of the day.
I want to stick with you for a minute, Tim. How will training change in this ever evolving environment? And what advice would you have for hoteliers who have to keep updating the protocols for their staff?
So training is changing, and we're actually seeing that here at our properties. We're seeing different things with opting in and opting out of programs. We're looking at things right now, too, as well as keeping amenities and things in the guest rooms. And when you look at housekeeping training, it's not even just specifically housekeeping. Now you're having to look at the front office, the front desk. You're getting into food and beverage. You're getting into other areas. So for now, for example, the front desk, we're looking at now sanitizing keys. We're doing some different things also to make sure we're doing a contactless guest experience. When you get into the food and beverage department, you're looking at different cleaning protocols. So now the housekeeping training has been more defined. It's been more extended outside of the housekeeping department. And I think one of the things that we've also have seen at our properties is now we're looking at a new way of defining deep cleaning and disinfecting protocols in the guest rooms, reaching that out to all the common areas. So again, it's going to be an ever-evolving process. And then I think with the different brand standards that you're going to be seeing, it's just going to be important that the hotels stay on top of that, stay abreast of them to make sure that we're hitting all of those touch points, because we want to make sure that the entire property is creating an in-sync environment with our teams.
Adria, how about from your perspective, what's going to change with housekeeping training?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think something that's going to be really critical is, just actual protection for them. So, they've always worn gloves in the rooms cleaning, but now, especially going into these large kind of places where there's going to be, a high chance of germs, making sure they know how to take off their personal clothes and put on a uniform that's laundered on site. All of that's really actually pretty difficult. So my sister's an ICU, nurse in the COVID unit, and her unit actually had 6 nurses get sick with COVID, and they are properly trained on how to put on their PPE. And, I just think that it's going to be extremely important for housekeeping teams to really know how to protect themselves. So, I think that making sure that they're not just trained once, but continuous training, on-demand availability to, how to be able to do something, so that you don't have to go find somebody, don't have to do mass trainings that are just forgotten, a couple weeks later. I think that that's going to be really important moving forward, is just that real-time, on-demand availability to training.
And Phil, do you have anything to add there about how training's going to change? Because you
I
have to
think to
make
build
sure
on,
it trickles down to so many properties.
yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things. First, I think it's about being nimble. We can make assumptions, we can listen to guest insights today to try to guide what the process is moving ahead. But we know that as guests actually start to travel again and stay with us, the ability to kind of flex as we need to react to specific needs that they identify is going to be really important. So although we may have always done that to some degree, the ability to be a bit more nimble and flexible there based on guest thoughts and direction is going to be important. Now I think it's trying to make sure we simplify and streamline as much as we can these programs and kind of training changes for our team members. They're going to be coming back, many of them coming back to work in an environment that is unfamiliar to them. It's not like the environment that they left when business started to slow. So making sure that we kind of be patient with them as they come back and give them training or enable them to use training that's digestible and easy to understand, I think is even more important than ever, because it's kind of, in many ways, it's almost kind of a whole new world for many of our team members from many angles.
There's no doubt that cleaning protocols are going to look different moving forward, and they're definitely going to be more intense, and they're definitely going to be out in front of the guest. How can hotels put guests at ease? Because I'm sure it's a double-edged sword. They like seeing that the hotel is clean, but I'm sure it's probably a little unnerving to see someone so intensely cleaning everything in the property. So, Tim, what do you think?
I feel you need to be transparent. So I think when all possible, that it's very important that we let our guests know how we're doing things. So maybe now it's taking advantage of our different platforms and making sure within the right way we're educating our guests on what we're doing in the guest rooms, what we're doing in the common areas. I think there's also a huge opportunity to make sure that we're transparent with our teams, making sure that they fully understand why we're doing these new processes, why we have these new protocols in place. So we're giving them the proper tools to ask our guests questions, talk to our guests, get that feedback. And I think we have to really get creative. Look at a new way of defining the normal and doing what we can to give out the information in a positive manner, but maybe use some different channels or some things that we wouldn't have thought of using from a housekeeping or cleanliness standpoint, or in a time like this, to make sure that we're showing them the impact of what we're doing and how we're making all of this happen on the property level.
Yeah, Tim, to build on that, I think with both guests and team members, it's kind of what you articulated, right? It's transparency and it's communications. As we were rolling out Hilton Clean Stay, we did a lot of insights and guest understanding, and we found that 71% of consumers globally are focusing more on cleanliness of their own environments at home. So there's already kind of a mindset of, hey, this is hyper on my radar screen. So making sure that they kind of see within reason what we're doing to have some comfort there. And then just kind of communicating. If you think about the hesitation they're going to have as they begin to travel, to understand what is the hotel really doing to kind of meet my needs. how we message that, right? From the time even before the time they start to make a reservation to the time they're shopping, and then they actually kind of continue their journey to stay with us, helping kind of build their confidence or comfort level that, this is going to be okay. So, I mean, those two things sound very simple, but I mean, Andrew and Tim, I think would all agree it's kind of that easy, right? It's not that easy, but it's that easily difficult. Transparency and communicate over and over. And the same again with their team members, kind of a new world, right? So helping them understand why we're doing what they're doing is going to be more important now than ever.
Adria, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think obviously transparency and communication, totally agree, 100% on everything that was said. But I think something that I really like that I'm seeing a lot more from the brands is these partnerships with healthcare. I think Hilton partnered with Mayo Clinic and Lysol, and I thought that was just phenomenal. Just seeing the partnerships with other industries, specifically healthcare related industries, and knowing best practices and pulling in those types of items, and then again talking about how you're utilizing those best practices from healthcare in your own industry. I think it's so critical. So I commend people who are reaching out and asking experts for advice. I really like that.
To continue, do you see all of these changes lasting long term, or do you think some of them will start to kind of drift away as the pandemic passes?
I think some things will stay, some things will leave. So I think that as far as the new equipment, all the new training, I think a lot of that will stay. However, I think, obviously PPE usage will decline as CDC doesn't recommend it as intensely anymore. I do think it's an interesting time because there's a lot of people that are able to try new things right now. So, people who might have had mini bars that were considering getting rid of them and now, definitely got rid of them for, at least during the pandemic time. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with. So I think it's one of those things where they can kind of A/B test what works. They have historical analysis on one thing, but now they are actually able to see what people actually liked better, and whether or not that removals or anything like that they might have been afraid of trying might be working better. So I think it's an interesting time for what stays and what goes, and I think that it's just flexibility, like a couple people have mentioned.
I think there's now more than ever kind of a double exclamation point after cleanliness, a heightened awareness that's going to be with us for a long time. So the visibility of what's happening, the awareness of partners, the communication of what we're doing, I think those things are a reset, a reboot for us long term. And kind of as Andrea shared, I think longer term will things like social distancing. So a guest walks into a hotel lobby or restaurant today, and the seating is sequenced 6 feet apart, et cetera. Will those things maybe diminish in importance over time? Maybe so. This is going to be a trying one, though, right? Because we're going to have to understand how our customers are viewing this and how quickly they respond. So I think much of it's going to be customer driven. As always, our industry's been focused on guests, and now more than ever, it'll be kind of looking for those clues and cues from them about how they feel and making sure we're responding to those needs.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think the key to that is going to be, again, this is going to be ever evolving. So I think it's going to make sure that we're listening to our guests, we're getting that feedback, and just making sure that we're doing what we can to listen, stay on top of that. And I think that's really going to be the key in addition to everything else.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for making time today. This was a great conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing all of your insights.
Tim and Andrea, thank you very much. Kristen, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lodging on Demand. If you want more content like this, please subscribe to our channel. Or you can listen to Lodging on Demand as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.